Hi everyone and welcome back. In my first video I talked about all the different reasons I think I'm autistic at 40. The response has been amazing, so thank you. It really does feel like we're in this together. Now I want to start digging deeper, and for me the absolute biggest, most constant theme throughout my entire life has been social confusion. That feeling of being out of sync, of not quite getting it. The phrase I always come back to is feeling like I'm missing a page from the social rulebook that everyone else seems to have been given at birth. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what missing a page feels like for me, with real examples from my life. First, I want to talk a bit about bluntness and the mask of humour. This is something that's been a double-edged sword throughout my entire life. Being blunt, I say what I think directly. No filter. For the friends I've managed to keep, they've always seen this as my sense of humour. And that's become my primary mask. I'd say something really direct or obvious, and people would laugh. So I learned to lean into it. It was a way to be social without actually understanding the social dance everyone else was doing. But here's the other side of the coin. For every person who found it funny, there was someone who was put off by it. They'd get quiet, or give me a weird look, or retaliate in their own way that was sometimes unsavoury, and I would be left completely confused. What did I say? It was just the truth, or maybe I was asking a question and that person was put on the defensive. I didn't understand that sometimes how you say something is more important than what you say.
Not what you said, it's just the way you said it.
So that has become a bit of an issue in my working life for me, when I sometimes might not understand the situation, so I feel like I'm just asking a question, and maybe how I phrase the question doesn't have usual pleases and thank yous, or it doesn't sound very respectful in the way that I ask it. So for example, if I'm taught how to use some equipment, I might say, what's that for? Rather than maybe, could you explain to me how this works, or how to use something. And sometimes if I'm then told, I might continue to ask questions until I understand. And that person can see that as some kind of act of defiance or disrespect, that I don't trust or believe what they're saying, when actually I'm just trying to understand something in my own terms, or I need something explained in a way that I'll understand. And then there's a perpetual fog of social interaction. This leads into a general feeling of being in a fog during conversation. For example, my wife might be talking while the TV is on and I just can't listen. The different channels of information crash into each other and I can't process any of it. I'll have to ask her to pause the TV, or I have to stop what I'm doing completely to pay attention. It's not a choice for me. My brain just can't split its attention that way. I think this is one thing that my wife would always joke that was maybe a bloke thing, or sometimes as guys we're accused of maybe not listening, and that's something that I think has covered up maybe that issue for me over the last 10 years or so since I've been with my wife. But I've come to realise, not to use it as an excuse, but I think there is a bit more to it. I seriously have no recollection of some of the things that she's said to me, and that's down to me concentrating on whatever's on the TV, or like I've mentioned before, I do play a lot of video games. If she talks to me while I'm playing one of those, I find it really hard to take in what's being said. And then there's the problem of getting fixated. In a conversation, someone might make a point I don't fully understand. Instead of just nodding and moving on, my brain will get stuck on it. I'll ask questions, I'll try to drill down to the exact meaning, and I can see the other person's face change. They think I'm being argumentative or rude, or that I'm upset. But I'm not. I'm genuinely just trying to understand what they mean. I'm waiting for that explanation that my brain can file away neatly. That inability to just let things go causes so much social awkwardness. And again, going back to work, this is one of the things I do have trouble with, as management see that as difficult. I also remember once writing an essay at university. I did get a first at university, and most of my essays were 2-1s and firsts to get that score, but there was one essay where I did get 40 or minimal third because I didn't answer the question that was put in the essay. So despite putting all that effort in to writing what I thought was a good essay that reflected the work that I'd put in, because I only got that mark, which really upset me, because I'd put in all that effort, and the person who might have put out their essay in like an hour the night before and rushed it would have got a better mark despite all my efforts. And I found that really unfair. So rather than just accepting what the lecturer was saying, I was badgering them to kind of understand how I didn't understand the question, if that makes sense. So that was frustrating for the lecturer because they was trying to explain it in a way that I'd understand, but I felt I'd answered the question, or the work I'd put in should be reflected in the grade if I've not exactly understood the question. And because that minimum mark felt like there was a bit more to it than what had actually happened because it wasn't being explained to me properly. Obviously, the next essay is on its way and eventually you do have to let it go, but the fact I still remember that today and talk about that today, this was 20 odd years ago, I still don't actually understand what's happened there. Obviously, I just had to try and move on from it. I think that's caused me a bit of difficulty throughout my life, whether it's lecturers, managers, peers who would think of themselves as higher up in kind of a social hierarchy. Probably had problems with me at certain points, and I'm seen as challenging when sometimes I'm just asking questions and trying to understand what's going on, and it looks disrespectful to be questioning these things sometimes, and that's not the way it is meant from my perspective, and I can control it to some extent. I've learnt to mask it over the years, but sometimes if I don't kind of externalise those questions, and that's when these things start racing through your head on an evening and you struggle with sleep because it feels unresolved. And then there's the problem that I can sometimes have reading the room and the Invisible Rulebook. So it's kind of all about the unwritten rules. So for example, at a party, my wife will literally have to tell me, Sam, it's time to go, and be really clear about it when, we've maybe been stood for half an hour to an hour, like me personally not taking the hints. I don't pick up on the yawning, the looking at the clock, the comments about having an early start the next day. I'm just having a nice time, completely oblivious to the social cues that the evening is over, and I need it stating directly. I think some of that is also reflected in my own standards. So for example, when friends and family are at my house, I'll never be asking them to leave or pushing them out the door as such, or dropping those hints, because for me they can just stay as long as they like, and that kind of is also part of the problem, especially with responsibilities. Like for us, we've got to think about the next day, especially for young children. We know we're going to get our heads being bounced on from 6-7 in the morning. Those kind of things can cause issues when you're trying to maintain a normal family and working life. When it comes to past relationships, it's caused problems, not understanding this invisible rule book. I remember at university, I shared a house with my girlfriend who I'd been with about 4 years. So we shared the house with about another 8 or 9 people. We broke up, and she'd broke up with me, and a few weeks later when I'd started seeing someone new and I was happy, I felt like I'd moved on, so I didn't see a problem me bringing this new girlfriend into the household. My friends and her friends just saw it as me kind of probably trying to wind her up, trying to rub her face in the fact I'd met someone new, but for me it was just never like that. As far as I was concerned, I was broken up with and wasn't doing anything wrong, but my ex was really upset and her friends were telling me I was being insensitive, and I was just genuinely baffled, and I just never understood that at the time. We were broken up, I wasn't cheating, so what was the problem? I couldn't understand the social norm that you're supposed to be discreet or wait a respectful amount of time, or that flaunting a new relationship could be hurtful. It felt like an arbitrary rule that no one had ever explained to me, and I just didn't get it. I think when I look back now, I kind of realise a bit more that was a difficult situation for my ex, and I probably would have shown more respect, but like I said, I just didn't feel that I was doing anything wrong at the time. And probably my friends would support me by saying, backing up the logic of that argument. Those are the kind of things that have caused a bit of trouble for me, and it probably didn't help that the person I moved on with, I've maybe come to realise over the years that she might have been autistic as well, so maybe between us, we didn't really see anything wrong. And yeah, I do feel like maybe a couple of past partners and relationships I've had, and one of the reasons I've maybe not realised that I might be autistic, or maybe some of the relationships I've been in, that person might have been autistic or showed traits as well, that have helped me mask over the years. And one of the other things that has been quite an obvious trait I discussed in my previous video that I'll go into a bit more depth with is eye contact, and sometimes the pressure to perform, and that doesn't relate to my previous comments about relationships. By pressure to perform, I mean that feeling when all eyes are on you and you just seize up, want the world to swallow you up, and that's something I've always just thought was a general shyness that I know a lot of people have, and for them it could be an autistic trait too. But I think for me, I've realised, it has been really debilitating at certain points in my life. I do remember overcoming it once. I was at college and I did communication studies, and one of the parts of the module was you had to give a presentation, and I think I overcame it, got a decent grade for that particular module. I just had to really swat up on what I was saying, and probably came across quite robotic in the presentation because I was literally just managing to regurgitate the lines, and unlike now where I do have a few notes in front of me, really had to, for the 2 or 3 weeks before, like some kind of actor, like memorise the lines and really get out of my head the thought that people was watching me and just focus on that, which helped me overcome it. But yeah, I remember dodging that again at uni, that particular part of a module. It has probably held me back. Like I've said before, I did do well at university, but maybe in those situations, like I went on to do a PhD and didn't stick with it, and it was probably because I just felt really uncomfortable, sat in a room with a few other people. Like, one of the things you had to do was kind of explain your PhD and be interrogated on it, which I could do on paper and had the intelligence to deal with. It was more the fact of just being in that social situation, and it's something maybe working life has helped with. Obviously, my work experience has always been set in customer service, so related to that, one of the most consistent comments I've had in my entire life is about eye contact. I was bullied at school for it, but everyone takes some kind of flack at school for something, don't they? So, but people have always said I never look at them when I'm talking to them, and I'm so self-aware of it now that I actually preempt it a bit, so I can kind of force myself to give eye contact, but maybe that seems a bit unnatural, so I don't know if that's always the best thing to do. But when I meet someone new, so for example, when I did meet my wife on our first date, I did point out to her, made sure she knew it was nothing personal. I just so you know, I struggle with eye contact. It doesn't mean I'm not listening, and managed to back that up, thankfully, by engaging in the conversation well enough to get a second date. But yeah, she noticed I was looking over her shoulder, like we was in a pub and there was screens over her shoulder, and I had my eyes on them while I was paying attention to what she was saying, if that makes sense. And yeah, thankfully she managed to stick with me with that. But yeah, I have had, not so much in relationships, but people comment on that, especially like with friends, if we meet another group of friends or new people while we're out, and they'll be like, what's his problem, aren't you looking at me? Or going back to my working life, sometimes I think that's created like a kind of a bit of an aura of mistrust when maybe I'm saying something and not looking people in the eye. And especially when I've worked in places that have not just a small group of staff, but maybe tens, or like where I work now, it's got over 100 staff. It's one of those things people can gossip about, and if there are question marks over levels of trust, it's one of those things that does get picked on. But yeah, I think with eye contact, I just find it intensely intimidating. I feel like I'm supposed to be reading something in people's eyes, but I just actually get confused. And I think I started off thinking I was more like intimidating them, because like maybe my eye contact would just like made me kind of react internally, and maybe any kind of eye contact back. Basically I just feel like I get confused quite quickly with eye contact. I can't process the words and maintain that visual connection, and yeah, I rely almost entirely on verbal cues to engage. So I will say, tell me what you're feeling, because I probably won't see it in your face. Sometimes that gets me into trouble. Again, going back to the wife, she might be in a mood and, need that assurance or attention, and I might look like I'm being completely ignorant to it. Maybe I've just not noticed or picking up on the cues. Don't worry, she's quite verbal about these things now. And so yeah, after all this exhausting social interaction, struggling with eye contact, a bit of a pressure to perform when you feel like the eyes are on you, and trying to read the room, which might not be a completely natural thing, and trying to understand this invisible rule book, and dealing with all the confusion of social interaction in general, there can be a bit of an aftermath effect and a bit of a need for clarity, and that can be quite exhausting. So like after a social interaction, especially if there was any confusion or disagreement, I just can't let it go. It'll circulate in my mind for hours, affecting my sleep sometimes. I'll replay the conversation over and over and try and figure out where I went wrong and what they really meant. I think that can be like one of the reasons I drink probably a bit more than I should. I won't go as far to say I'm an alcoholic or anything like that, but I do think that has helped me over the years maybe not think so much on an evening, and that's been quite almost like a form of medicine for me, and helped me cope with the stress of dealing with people basically. And I think that need for clarity is just so strong that I've been known to just dramatically absent myself from social groups entirely. If I feel consistently confused and overwhelmed, it feels better just to make a clean break and to have that finality, to know where I stand. Even if it's alone, it's less stressful than being in a state of perpetual social uncertainty. I can certainly point to a few moments in my life. My friends from school, for example, I am in touch with one of them, but most friendships I've just let kind of drift apart quite easily when it's got to the point that, I just feel like I don't understand what's happening. And I've never kind of hesitated to move away. Like, I don't live in my hometown now, and I still have family there and do visit, but throughout my life I've lived in different places, had different chapters. Where I'm living now, I've been here about 8 or 9 years since I met my partner. I am trying to work a bit more on maintaining the relationships I've had while I'm here, but at the same time, if it feels like those relationships are becoming a bit tiring. Like, I have this strange rule that I kind of have to make for myself. Like, if I feel like I've invited someone to something maybe 3 times and I've not got the right response, or I feel like I'm putting in too much effort basically, I will kind of ease back and wait for them to come to me. And I think that's just a way of protecting myself, and for me that's quite a logical thing to do. Like, even before I realised I might be autistic, I've mentioned that to a few people, and I've kind of realised since looking at this possibility I might be autistic that does sound really strange to say to someone. Almost like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing, and kind of learnt a bit more not to do that over the past couple of years. The penny might have just dropped at the right time for that. But yeah, I still have that feeling of really struggling to kind of maintain relationships and friendships. Just how exhausting I find it, basically. Of course, that's not an issue with my dog here, Molly. I've not really thought about or looked into too much about how pets can affect all this coping, but I do know I've always wanted a dog in my life. I'll have to look into that a bit more for another video about pets and autism. Yeah, she's very good for us, aren't you, Molly? And yeah, so I've touched on it a couple of times. I think in the workplace is where the missing page causes real problems. I think it has probably held me back throughout my life. Like, I have been a manager of a smaller company. When I was 21, I was kind of had that fork in the road moment. I'd just got a first at uni, my dissertation was really good, and the plan was to turn that dissertation into a PhD. So I did my PG cert just to clue myself up on the methodologies, and then basically you end up with a qualification after a year doing that. And then if you decide not to do your PhD, at least you've got a qualification to show for your time. They did realise the university I was at, it's not for everybody. And yeah, that became a bit of a case for me. I did a part-time retail job to support my studies and my lifestyle, but just got more into the retail job and found that like a possibly a safer place for me to grow up and develop and just get on with life. Like I was quite impatient as well. Like I did want to start earning and settling down, moving out, all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily an autistic thing. I think a lot of people are probably like that. So yeah, my PhD ended up getting kind of put to the side while I concentrated on work. Daft decision really. Getting a minimum wage job, committing to that when possibly sticking with a PhD would have meant in the long term probably a better future. But that decision just made a lot of sense to me at the time, and I think it was just that pressure I felt doing my PhD of having to talk to people and present my work and in that kind of atmosphere. Like the writing was always really good. I always got good marks with that. It was just the going to visit the tutors and try and talk about these things was very difficult. It was a lot easier just to stand behind the checkout, and that's kind of stuck with me throughout my life. But then did well at work and ended up in a management role, which I think did suit me, to be honest, because it was a lot easier to mask social interaction. I could make it about work. I did, a detailed itinerary of the day when I was a manager, almost minute by minute, which protected me from social interaction. I was a lot more comfortable being in control in that way. It helped me get through the day. But in other jobs, it's caused me real issues. I've had problems because I'm blunt and maybe don't understand how I'm coming across. I always put that down to maybe being a manager before, and maybe the way I talk to managers I've had since. Maybe it's almost like I feel like I know better kind of thing because of that experience. But I think I've realised it's a bit more than that, and I do get confused by feedback about my behaviour. I literally don't get it. I can get on with the work and, exceed at work, but I've always got that feeling like I'm missing a page, and they're happy because I'm doing the work, but actually some things are circling around in my head sometimes that if things don't make sense or they've been explained to me. I mean, to be honest, I feel like I've had probably a lot of bad managers over the course of my working life that are always the best at doing those kind of things, but the people around me will just get on with it, go home and enjoy their evening. But for me, it becomes a bit of a mission to understand and feel like I'm doing the right thing when I'm working. Like I say, it's just hard just to get on with things sometimes. So one of the ways I've tried to combat that is ask for written feedback, because verbal feedback with all its nuance and hinting just doesn't stick. I need it in black and white, and I do feel victimised at times because I couldn't understand the manager's perspective. It felt like they were making up rules, and that's my kind of rigid black and white thinking clashing with the neurotypical social work of office politics, I think. So yeah, that's something I've talked to my current manager about, just having that direct feedback, and it's helped understanding I'm maybe autistic. My manager knows that as well, so that we're a bit more on the same page. So rather than missing a page, hopefully it's a bit of a better starting point. So from here on in, I'm hoping those kind of work issues go away. So fingers crossed. It would have been a lot more useful to kind of maybe realise I was autistic earlier and have that self-awareness that, it's not just being awkward, it's maybe just the way how I process things, and not even needing that extra help as such. It's just that awareness of where I'm going wrong in my thought process. So, in conclusion, for 40 years now, this has been my normal. A constant low-grade hum of confusion, thinking I was just awkward or rude or not trying hard enough. But learning about autism has been like someone handing me that missing page. It's not that the page was blank, it was just written in a language I couldn't read. Now I'm starting to learn the translation. Understanding that this is a common autistic experience, this social confusion, this literalness, this difficulty with non-verbal cues, has lifted a weight off my shoulders I didn't even know I was carrying. It's not a personal failing, it's a neurological difference. I'm sure many of you will have felt this way too. What's your missing page, and what's the social rule that you've never been able to figure out? Let's talk about it in the comments. It helps to know we're not alone in this. Thanks for watching, and in the next video I'll talk a bit more about the topic of the sensory overload, and hopefully I'll see you there.